afternoon, everybody, and welcome to the final instalment of the Record Show Consumer Duty trilogy of webinars. My name is Gary Evans, and I'm both the Chief Product Officer and, for my sins, Chief Commercial Officer at Record Show, and also our sister company, TCC, which deals in work and regulatory consultancy. I am joined today by the wonderful Olivia Fahy. Olivia, do you want to give a quick intro?
Sure, thank you. Hi, everybody. Yes, I'm Olivia. I am a Senior Product Manager at Record Show. I'm responsible for our Conversation Review AI platform, which provides enhanced QA in regulated industries and which we're going to be talking a little bit about today. I'm also a member of TCC and Record Show's Consumer Duty Working Group. And before I joined Record Show, I worked at the FCA for 5 years in supervision.
Fabulous. Thank you, Olivia. So to give a quick synopsis of where we've got to so far then, in webinar one, we kind of introduced consumer duty, really, talked about some of the kind of detail of what it was and what it meant for kind of regulated organisations, specifically in the mortgage space. We talked about some of the challenges that we've been hearing from firms, which kind of went from it's not for me because I look after my customers properly to it's TCF on steroids, and it's just to catch those chonky ones. And hopefully in that first session, we kind of dispelled some of those kind of misconceptions as to what the consumer duty is all about, as it is a kind of fundamental change in regulation that will affect everybody, which is what pretty much the second webinar was about. So in the second webinar, what we covered then was what the regulatory expectations are, including how the consumer duty will be both supervised and enforced against. And I guess the big topic of change, as I've been looking at consumer duty with my kind of old analyst hat on, was it's all about evidence. And so the old style of what TCF actually is, and show us some really good policies and ensure you're well set up to do a good job to look after your customers, is very different to what the consumer duty is asking you for, which is actual evidence of the outcomes of your consumers' journeys. So you could have the best vulnerability policy in the world, for example, but while I'll be coming to you as if I was the FCA, I'd be asking for, show me the last 50 customers that have come through your process and the outcomes they had, how you looked after them, how you supported them, how you identified the vulnerability and how you treated those vulnerabilities. And obviously that's quite a step change away from what the kind of historic way of looking at consumer outcomes and kind of treating customers fairly was all about. What we also kind of picked up on last time was the importance of data and having a data strategy. So if evidence is kind of the building blocks of the consumer duty, then ensuring that you have an ability to capture the right data, measure the right data, and kind of present the right data and use that data is incredibly important. So we talked quite a lot about kind of a data strategy, and also then the role that technology plays to utilize that data in consumer duty compliance. Which is where we're going to today. So as a kind of a very early intro into what we're going to talk about today, we are going to share some of our thoughts around random sampling and how the kind of traditional approach to quality assurance is not going to cut the mustard with consumer duty. We'll talk a little bit about kind of why there's a potential influx of consumer complaints in the near future and how that should be considered a real risk, and how kind of claims management firms are jumping on the bandwagon. And I actually had a very interesting conversation with a building society just yesterday, in fact, who was talking to me about some of the challenges they're having with the FCA of. It was a really kind of interesting example of, I've got a customer who's got £1 million house. They had a 1.06% rate. They can afford that rate. They're now standing on the barrel of a 6% rate, which they can't afford. What do? Do I try and get them to move out of the house where they've got £200,000 worth of equity today? Or do I leave them in there for 2 years? So they're struggling to pay me for 2 years. Their equity disappears because the housing market takes a downturn and they end up with nothing. And you can imagine what the the kind of the claims management companies are going to think about stories like that. And you go, well, these are organisations who are trying to do the right thing, but in doing the right thing, have kind of created a kind of quandary for consumers that almost is a no-win situation for the building society for. So I think there's a whole host of interesting things around kind of complaints in the future, given the current economic climate, and how we think technology can help mitigate and prevent for that happening. Now we've slowly introduced slightly more interactive, more technological pieces as we've gone through this webinar trilogy, as we started to find our feet with how this technology works. So we're going to stretch it one step further today, and we're going to do a little poll. As this is about RegTech and it's about consumer duty, you should all have a little pop-up of a poll of what would actually convince you to use RegTech for QA. So if you are looking to deliver enhanced quality assurance, what are the things you would need to be able to tick in order to get that business case through? And there's a couple of options there, which I won't talk through, as you've all got them. Feel free to hold on until you've heard some of the rest of what we've got to talk about before making a decision on that. But we will flash it up at the end with the results, which I'm sure will be really interesting. Thank you. Right, so now we finished the intro, longest intro in the world. We're now moving on to the actual body of the webinar, and I'm going to talk a bit about random sampling and why we think their days are numbered. Now, as my boss always tells me, there are two things wrong with random sampling. The first is it's random, and the second is a sample, because it fundamentally doesn't work. So especially in organizations and use cases like kind of mortgages, both kind of advice at the front end, collections at the back end, you are all doing a good job. So you are only ever going to get somewhere between 5 and 10% wrong. So there'll only be 5 or 10% kind of cases where you have a compliance problem. So if you're only taking a 10% sample and only 10% of those bad, you're not seeing a great deal of the actual problems that your the outcomes are so the poor outcomes you are actually exhibiting. And so you're not really able to drive some insight as to what to do next. You don't know where the problems really lie. You don't know whether it's about individual people or parts of the process. And so you're in a place where you're kind of ticking a box, but you are not really understanding exactly where your problems lie and what to do next about them. And under the consumer duty, I don't think that's going to cut muster. So if you're the FCA and you have to show me what kind of outcomes you're delivering for your consumers, you say, well, I check 1 in 10 calls. They're going, well, that's not good enough. And the traditional approach of you check the calls manually using good, expensive QA resource. If you try to scale that up from your 10 to 15% sample to 100%, then you're going to have 6 to 10 times more QA resource than you've got currently. And that's financially not feasible for anybody. So for us then, the answer is to utilize technology to mitigate and minimize the amount of time you waste on good calls, and you maximize the efficiency and the productivity of QA of the bad calls. And that's what I'm going to hand over to Olivia shortly to talk about, because the title of this webinar is Show Me, Don't Tell Me, and for the last 10 minutes I've simply been telling you. So we are very quickly going to go over to that now. And so I'm going to pass over to Olivia. Olivia.
Brilliant, thank you. Right, I'll just do the first difficult task of sharing my screen. You can see that? Yep, brilliant, okay. So yes, so I just am going to do a quick walkthrough of our conversation review AI platform to try and bring to life some of the product benefits and product features. So this is essentially a product that we've designed to provide enhanced QA to support organisations to increase the efficiency and effectiveness of their QA teams, and crucially also to ensure consistency of QA reviews to monitor and evidence customer outcomes. So it's currently a product that is used to help with call quality assurance, And these are calls that can happen at any stage of the customer journey. So for example, it could be mortgage advice calls, it could be mortgage collections calls. So kind of any stage along that journey, this can be used for. So the first step is to essentially access the audio, so it can be ingested and analysed by the system. And there's two really easy ways that we can do this. If conversations are happening over the phone, as many do these days through organisational telephony systems, we can API straight into those systems to access the calls. Or if there are still conversations happening face-to-face or remotely through virtual applications like Zoom or Teams, we have an audio capture app which gives access to the calls that actually means that those calls can be recorded. So what it means is that actually those conversations that previously had to have a person in the room or on the call to be doing that additional analysis to check that the advice being given is the correct advice, there's much greater access available for those conversations. And I'm just going to show you the first stage of what the system would look like. So the first step is that once we've accessed that audio, the call is turned into a transcript so that our AI models can analyze it. And this is an example of how you would see a call within our portal. So you can see that there's an audio bar at the top of the screen, the transcript below, and then a number of currently grayed out boxes on the screen. And these boxes would essentially align to the topics that exist within a QA checklist. We call them classifications. And this particular example on the screen is a mortgage advice conversation example. So our AI models, which we train on thousands of hours of financial services specific conversations, as well as examples of calls for the specific use case, will break the conversation down into these topics. And as if by magic, you can see that happening here. So essentially you can see the call rather than having to listen to a call end to end and kind of work out what's being discussed and where that aligns with the checklist. You can see the topics visually on the screen, and then reviewers can also select and deselect those topics so that they can work through their checklist systematically and jump straight to the relevant sections of the audio to listen to those parts of the call instead of having to listen end to end. Or if you want to repeat a part of the call and re-listen to it, you don't have to remember where you heard it. You'll be able to identify it through the classifications that are on the screen. And when a section of the audio is selected, the transcript then also jumps to the same point and moves along with the audio. So a reviewer doesn't just have to listen to the audio to hear what's being said, they can also read along with the transcript. So this is something that we hear a lot from clients when we're talking to them, is that they've tried speech analytics tools that are on the market. A lot of call recording systems have inbuilt speech analytics. And they're not necessarily that impressed by what's come out as a result. So we just wanted to share a little bit on actually why our platform is different to the speech analytics tools that you might have had some experience of. And essentially, other speech analytics tools on the market are relying on keyword or phrase searches to find parts of the conversation that they're flagging. So they'll be looking for specific words or phrases and flagging those. And this actually means, because they're just looking for those words without any surrounding context, it means that in general, they'll find 5 false positives for every true positive. So in the context of QA, for every 1 accurate thing they find, there'll be 5 inaccurate things that they also find. And unfortunately, this actually means that it creates more work for QA teams rather than less, because when clients have been trying to use these for QA purposes, they are just getting all of these additional flags. And so they don't really believe that speech analytics is a useful tool for enhancing QA. But this isn't true. We believe that speech analytics is a very useful tool for enhancing QA, but you just need to be using the right type of analysis. And while keyword spotting can be really useful for in-call analytics, so for example, if you want to identify whether someone's swearing at an advisor or if an advisor is swearing at a customer, for the type of in-depth post-call analysis that's required by QA teams, it's the levels of accuracy, because it is less than 20% accurate, it just isn't fit for purpose. And it's not sophisticated enough to support QA teams. What we do instead is we leverage machine learning and thousands of hours of manual training. So we have an amazing in-house team of linguistics analysts who actually go through the calls when we receive them and painstakingly teach the model essentially to understand the context around the language that's used. So we're not just looking for keywords or key phrases, we're teaching our models to understand that if someone says this, it relates to affordability, or if someone says this, it could relate to a fact find. And as a result, our accuracy is around the 90% mark rather than 20%. So we really spend the time training the models, making sure that, that we kind of build what's called a neural network beneath the bonnet so that it actually can find really highly accurate results and be really beneficial for QA teams.
Sorry, can I just chip in? Because actually, over the last year, what I've seen more than anything else is the biggest barrier to sale for our product is the fact that everyone know and believe that speech analytics doesn't work for QA, it just doesn't work. And we know it does. And actually, we have a number of kind of high street banks who've been using this for a number of years. And for me, if you are concerned about that, the answer is give it a go, because the results are always spectacular. Sorry, I will stop my sales pitch.
Great, absolutely. It's a great point, well made. But what also, so we actually also don't just stop at the classification level. So we take this different approach where we're teaching the models around language and we're breaking the calls down into topics. But we then go one step further and actually break our classifications further down into individual risk points. And these are based on the areas that an advisor should have covered during a conversation. So you can see here on the screen that there is a list of risk points there, which then have an associated score with them. And again, the risk points are aligned to a reviewer's QA checklist, so it helps an individual reviewer work through their checklist even more effectively and do their review even more effectively. But actually, because we can essentially do a virtual QA check across 100% of calls before the human reviewers get involved, it means that the conversations can be scaled and grouped based on their level of risk. And so all of the calls that would be classified as red or high risk or as bad calls or problematic calls that need looking at can be identified, which, as Gary was talking about earlier, enables QA assessors to spend the majority of their time looking at those calls and hugely increases the effectiveness of QA teams. And this is an example of the type of oversight that we can provide within our portal through our MI dashboard. So this dashboard essentially provides that summary overview of 100% of all cases and their associated risk. So you can see the overall risk status, you can see it broken down by classification, you can see those classifications broken down by how well they're being covered by advisors. And you can also have high risk areas highlighted so that human reviews can be targeted at whichever of those areas you want to look at. So they could be targeted purely at just the bad case in general, or if you wanted to do a deep dive into perhaps cases where, for example, affordability wasn't being covered, you'd be able to filter those because the dashboard's also interactive, so you can jump straight to a list of cases just by clicking through. And this is another thing that we hear a lot from our clients or clients that we're talking to, and they say they understand the value that can be gained from QA, but because of this random sampling approach to QA, there's just no sort of detailed analysis that they can gain from it. So there's no way of identifying trends, there's no way of identifying themes. All it's really that useful for is one-on-one individual feedback, which obviously is still very useful, but it doesn't have that broad level oversight and the ability to identify those trends and really get deeper. And so this insight really does provide clients with the ability to identify trends, identify themes, and then actually look into root causes. So this could then be filtered by team, by area, by department, go in, understand why things are going wrong in that area and address them. So that actually over time, it should mean that the overall number of reds and ambers is decreasing and the number of green cases is increasing. So actually you're just, in general, if we're thinking again about kind of consumer outcomes and what's being delivered for consumers, it's that continuous improvement of the consumer journey. So that's a bit of a kind of whistle-stop tour through the key functionality of the system. I've talked about some of the benefits and the accuracy that our platform provides, but I'm now going to hand back to Gary to talk about what this means for organisations in real terms.
Thanks, Olivia. That's great. Actually, before we click into the kind of business casey type slide, I wonder if Hannah, our kind of head of marketing in the background, could possibly put the results of the poll up, which I think are quite interesting, actually. There you go. I'm assuming everybody can see that's not just me. But what I find fascinating is there's 2%. So I'm assuming there's kind of 1 or 2 people who are already using speech analytics. I wonder whether that speech analytics is giving you what you actually need, or whether it falls into the not fit for purpose camp. But for everybody else, there seems to be quite a high proportion of people who are clicking multiple things, which is to be expected and good. The consumer duty evidencing appears to be kind of the almost the most important thing, but there's almost a tick box that says, but it can't cost me any more money. Which I kind of get. I understand things are tight and one for everybody, and so finding that is quite tough. And about half of you wanting greater oversight of your portfolio. Olivia, can you put the next slide on? Because I think, as if by magic, I might have some of the answers to that. Excuse me, bit of man flu today, not on my finest form. Right, so if we look at the left set of charts, this is kind of a typical solution for a typical scenario for people in your situation. So 10% random sample being reviewed. Of the ones that are reviewed, 90+% of them are good, 8% of them are bad. But because you are doing a random sample, you're reviewing all of them. So effectively, you're taking 100% of your FTE, and 92% of them are essentially, and being flippant, wasting their time on calls that are absolutely fine. And whilst it's nice to be able to identify the good things that are happening as well, so you can reinforce them, actually the prime job of the QA person is to identify where the problems are, to ensure that you are able to maximize positive consumer outcomes and minimize negative ones. If you use conversational AI, you don't have a 10% random sample, you have a full sample. It's 100%. So the system will go through and automatically assess 100% of calls. And then, because we're able to identify which ones are good and which ones are bad, you can focus your QA resource on the bad calls. And as Lily talked when we were kind of walking through Classify, the methodology that we've got, where you're able to kind of analyze it topic by topic, all the evidence we have from all our clients says it doubles the productivity of the QA people. So effectively, you're able to do twice as much work with the same people, or in this case, you can have half the number of people redeploy half of your workforce on other things to add value, and are able to drop that down. And in this case, because you're now only doing 8% of your calls rather than the 10% random sample, actually you're able to reduce your resource requirement by 60%. Because you're looking at less calls, you're looking at the calls that are higher risk, and you're reviewing them twice as fast. So in terms of delivering a cost-benefit analysis, this will do it. In terms of giving you greater oversight on your portfolio, this will do it. And in terms of giving you the evidence to kind of tick the box for consumer duty compliance and provide the evidence to the FCA when they come and knock in, again, this will do it for you. Everyone thinks I have to invest in order to get technology to do things better. If I was to do it with resource, I'd have to go 6 to 10 times more resource than I have today. What we find is people get a net reduction in cost for QA, even when they incorporate the cost of utilizing the technology, because the reduction in kind of QA resource is so significant. So I think that's pretty much the kind of end of what the demo is and kind of what we're offering. I suppose though it's, what does this actually mean for the mortgage sector? And whilst we haven't had the question, although there is a question, but I'll look a second. Whilst we haven't had the question, the thing that we believe you're probably thinking is, yeah, it all looks really cool and very interesting and very swish, but why do we need to do this now? And for me, there are 2 main reasons. The first one is very financial, and I'm going to talk about it. I'm going to hand over to Olivia then to pick up the kind of more compliance angle. So for me, the first thing is about complaints. It's about kind of who are you going to be targeted by for your future complaints based on the outcomes you've delivered for your consumers. And typically in any kind of remediation exercise, the biggest challenge is being able to evidence the information that you provided to your customers and the decisions that have been made off the back of them. So what the claims management companies look for, they look for the people who aren't doing the proper measuring. And they're able to then go, well, prove that you did give us the right advice, and you can't because the information isn't available. So because the mortgage teams, your mortgage teams are under increased demand, be it because of the cost of living crisis, the general market volatility, the increases in interest rates, that all has a big impact on your customers, making them more vulnerable. So customers who were completely stable and happy before are all of a sudden in a vulnerable case. And as soon as they get to the end of their fixed terms, as soon as they get to the end of their they're trying to go for a new mortgage, they have a massive problem because their affordability is dramatically different to how it was before. And it's inevitable when the pressure is on, the volumes are up, and the situations are more complex that you are going to get some errors because people are only human. And what you want to be doing is making sure that you are in a place to catch those errors when they happen and be able to mitigate for them. And that is what the kind of claims management companies will be looking for. They'll be looking for who are the ones who are not doing a good job of this, because I'll be able to get in there. They'll be easy targets. So I think you can either react to the complaints when they come, or you can take proactive action now to gain a proper full understanding of the advice that you're giving across all your outcomes for all your customers, utilising technology. And that's the big financial reason. And I'm going to hand over to Olivia now for the more consumer duty compliance angle, because that has significant implications and consequences as well.
Yeah, and I think the consumer duty, I mean, I think there's a few points here. And I think, one of the key things, we talked about this a lot in the last webinar. I think we said it in the first webinar. I can't really say it enough that it is, this is viewed by the FCA as a step change in regulation. It isn't just more of the same. And I think that is really, a lot of that is also down to mindset change within organisations to approach it in a different way. And something that I found really interesting actually the other day when I was talking to a chief risk officer in an organisation, and he said, I want to be able to tell the FCA that I've got oversight of 100% of my activity. And I think that is something that, this having 100% oversight has only ever been seen as sort of a pipe dream, and something that is, was kind of viewed as it's not really achievable. So we can't even think about it. Random sampling is what we do. And so I think the fact that there are people now saying, well, I want to be able to tell the FCA that I do have 100% oversight really shows the direction of travel of some organisations in a really positive direction. And the fact that there are products out there that actually do enable firms to do that as well is something that could as well become, a question from the FCA in terms of, well, actually, this is now something that is achievable. So why aren't you doing it? Why don't you have this level of oversight to show us? So I think that's interesting in terms of the fact that actually it does have this different approach. I think ultimately, as again, I think we've already said today, this focus on evidencing, firms are going to need to be able to evidence the outcomes they're delivering. And the FCA have also specifically said that firms need a data strategy for monitoring outcomes. So they want firms to be utilising technology and utilising data to actually get them this kind of enhanced oversight and this enhanced monitoring of outcomes, because it is actually about outcomes. It shouldn't be viewed as a kind of a tick box compliance approach where you're just going, okay, we've got the guidance, we've just got to make sure we're ticking all of this and then we're done. It is really thinking about that. Well, what is the end result for consumers that we're producing here? And I think just a final thought on kind of the FCA piece as well, and kind of the role of tech and AI specifically. Obviously, we're very keen on AI and machine learning because it's part of our product, what makes our product so great. But the FCA is also increasingly discussing AI. Just in the last couple of weeks, it's been the topic of 2 speeches that they've put out. And actually, they've said AI is going to be something that can help shape firms' consumer duty strategies and also has been highlighted as a tool that can help firms embrace the step change in culture that is required by the consumer duty. So they're really seeing AI and tech products as something that firms should be embracing, obviously in a safe and controlled way. So AI that is, that firms know that they can trust. But actually that it's a way for firms to become more sustainable and more efficient. So I think it is really something that, if firms embrace it, then the outcomes that they'll get and actually just the increased knowledge and oversight that they'll gain will just be, something again that, was completely just unbelievable a few years ago.
Thanks, Olivia. I just wanted to pick up, there was a question that was put about how would this benefit teams that do not specialize, but that deal with many different queries, conversation topics and types. And I suppose this comes, it does. So it does benefit those people. It works exactly the same way. What we have found is, again, if you have an incredibly scripted, kind of templated conversation, where everything happens in the right part of the conversation and it's very linear, then actually the whole keyword search tools work relatively well. Because they know where to look, and it's kind of very point and press. But that's not how anybody wants to have conversations these days, and everything is about kind of natural language. And so the way our system is set up is it recognizes different things that are happening. And when Olivia talked about the assure model, it's a contingent assure model. So, for example, if you were talking about mortgage advice, then it would look at all the things to do with term and affordability and a bunch of other things. If you were coming to have a conversation and you just wanted to check your mortgage balance, it wouldn't can then flag it as red because you didn't ask all the affordability questions. It's a far more sophisticated system than that. So we can identify when you need to be saying some things and then check against it, rather than simply applying a blanket across everybody. So hopefully that kind of rambly answer does give you a little bit of comfort of this isn't about it's completely boilerplate and requires you to be kind of hugely structured in your conversation. It's designed specifically to work with a natural conversation. That's why we spent the thousands of hours of kind of transcription and annotation to teach the engine how to identify parts of conversations. I think that has pretty much brought us to the end. And as I kind of said, kind of halfway through, there was one of the big barriers to people using this is because they've done speech analytics in the past and it doesn't work. The other barrier is, but it's quite a lengthy process to train a model. So if I've got to train a model specifically for me, then that's an upfront investment and it's a bit of a leap of faith. So what we've done is, because we have a number of major high street bank mortgage organizations sending all their data to us and being analysed, we've been able to create a kind of a best-in-class generic model. So it's effectively plug and go for the mortgage market for their QA teams, and all you have to do is to send us some calls. We'll give you access to the portal. It'll all be reviewed. You can then check to make sure that it does what you want it to do, that it saves you the time, that it does identify the bad cases. And we can do that for free now. So if you are interested in taking a look at this technology, in giving it a go, then please feel free to drop us a line on hello@recordshow.com or the number there. And we will be offering these sort of free 30-day trials to anybody who comes to us before the end of January 2023. And Olivia, unless you've got anything else you want to say,
nope,
I think we could call it to a halt. And I'm pretty sure it's for the first time ever, I think, I've stopped talking before I'm supposed to. And we did have 45 minutes for this, but Olivia did say, I reckon it's half an hour. And so 35 is quite nicely somewhere in between. So thank you ever so much for attending this webinar and the series of webinars. We are really interested in hearing what you thought of them. So feel free to drop us some feedback, and enjoy your Christmas.
Thank you.